Okay, Mr. Tejas, are we ready? Okay. Okay, we're going to call the meeting of the CRRMA Board in session on July 12th at 9:02. Mr. Tejas, do we have any public comment?
Yes, ma'am. We have two members of the public signed up, Mr. Rosendo Parra and Mr. John Ibert. I'll remind the public, please come address the podium from the podium. I'll remind members of the public that we have a 3-minute time limit. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Named Rosendo Parra, owner of American Trader Service, located at 1360 Mission Ridge. The problem that I have now, that road is being paved as we speak, and I have no access to my place. In order to get into my place, I have to go past my place a quarter mile, make a U-turn, and go into my place. Now, my business is a truck and trailer place. I will have to go into a residential area and to make a U-turn and come back in. That's the first exit. The second will be through Paseo del Este, which will be like 6 miles away in order to get into my place. But I would like to know if I can get some help on making a turn at in front of my place so I can have access.
What is the address again?
1360 Mission Ridge.
It's the work that we're doing. Brandon, do you want to?
Yes, ma'am. So, Mr. Rosendo, I'll ask you to speak with David Head. He's managing a lot of those program out there on the Far East side, so we'll work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
much.
Next, Mr. John Ibert.
Buenos dias, good morning all. My name is John Ibert, aka Juanito Ibert, aka Biker John. I am an expert bicyclist. I've been here for over a quarter century, and we are the hidden gem of the world, the crossroads of North America, anchored by El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, and Las Cruces. There should be no bicycles on Interstate 10 between Texas exit 72, which is the Fort Hancock exit, and exit 139, New Mexico, which is the old Mesilla exit. And that's if you are, whether you're eastbound or westbound, either way. It's already illegal to go on the safety corridor in New Mexico. So that pretty much eliminates bicycling on the interstate between Anthony and Las Cruces. I have pedaled these routes many times. I've provided each of you with a handout of a route that I've been taking. I really would like to see us improve the route. I know we have the Go 10 construction, and I've been promised that it's going to be up to standard. I hope so. But the Hudspeth County from Spur 148 to the El Paso County line can certainly be improved. And then we also have some responsibility for 3 or 4 miles or so as soon as you get across from Anthony, Texas, Anthony, New Mexico, and it's New Mexico 478. It's also known as Donovan Drive in El Paso. It is a wonderful bicycling road. We just have 4 or 5 miles there where the shoulder's not in good shape, and I've been told that we are responsible for that. So I strongly would like to see this sign posted for bicycles traffic. And if people have their valid passport, I strongly emphasize that they go into Mexico. Ruta Dos from El Porvenir up through Zaragoza is absolutely wonderful bicycling. It's a little bit difficult from there till you get up to San Jeronimo, Santa Teresa port of entry. But anything that the Camino Real RMA can do to help increase and make it more viable for bicycles, the better off it's going to be economically. People are going to say, hey, we can do this, we don't need to pedal. Now, I do not recommend bicycling during the midday of summers. I mean, I don't recommend it. But obviously mornings, I love it. And after the sun goes down at night, it's quite good. and I've gone to the MPO a large number. I think this is the second time I've ever been with Camino Real. The first time we were over at the old City Hall, but that was quite a number of years ago. Anyway, I would like you to please consider this. Go to my website, Facebook page for more information. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Do you have
Mr.
any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item number 3, adoption of minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of June 8, 2016. Those were handed out to the members. Entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the next item, number 4, presentation, discussion, and action on the potential removal of tolls from the Chavez Express toll lane. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So I have for you today a PowerPoint, and this is in large part the PowerPoint that was presented to the Executive Committee yesterday, but this is slightly revised. So we're going to be talking about Cesar Chavez Express toll lane, specifically the request that the RMA review options available for the potential removal of tolls from the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes. So what we're going to hear about, what you're going to hear about today, are a few things. The 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, which envisioned the tolling system that we were implementing, with Cesar Chavez being the first component of that. We're going to talk about the major project agreement terms that have been put into place to allow for Cesar Chavez and some of the other toll facilities that are planned. We're going to talk about the revenue, expenses, and debt of Chavez in particular, since that is the facility that is up and running today. We're going to talk about the toll removal options that we have reviewed to date, and then there will be a requested board action at the end of this presentation. So in the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, as you may recall, that was over $1 billion worth of transportation projects that was envisioned by TxDOT, the City of El Paso, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Regional Mobility Authority. We all got together and identified a slate of priority projects for the region. Included in there was the toll program that you see before you, which includes Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes, Border West Expressway, the Americas Managed Lanes, I-10 Managed Lanes, and Northeast Parkway. So here's a map to give you a feel for what we're talking about. You'll notice the blue line, the southern blue line. At the time, in 2008, that was referred to as the Southern Relief Route, which really consisted of several projects put together. Going from the east to the west, it included that small section there of blue. In fact, let me see. This section here is the Americas Managed Lanes. This section here is Cesar Chavez. This section here became the Border West Expressway, which is being built today. And the final segment then was the I-10 Managed Lanes proposed project. And of course, up in the northeast, you had the Northeast Parkway, all of which were intended to be toll facilities. So that was the plan. So after the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, the RMA then partnered with TxDOT and the city and the other entities to develop more than 15 separate agreements to implement Cesar Chavez and some of the other projects. But rather than go through, obviously, all of those agreements in detail, the highlights, the real main points that you can take from those 15-plus agreements are bulleted here. So the main one is, obviously, the RMA was scheduled to receive all of the toll revenues. The RMA, though, was also responsible for the operation and maintenance expenses for the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes. The RMA has a loan from TxDOT for O&M expenses, and this is an important point. It was recognized early on that Cesar Chavez would not cover itself, so the expenses were going to exceed the revenues in the early years, and that was understood from day one. So in order to cover that gap, the Regional Mobility Authority got what we refer to as the O&M loan from TxDOT. And we're going to get into detail on that one here in a few slides. So there was an O&M loan from TxDOT to cover that period until the expenses were covered by revenues. And then the final point is, once those revenues then cover the expenses, at that point all excess revenues then could be used by the Regional Mobility Authority for anything that an RMA could do. So that, as we often refer to it, that broadly defined term of transportation projects. So it includes anything that an RMA could be involved in. Those are really, in my view, the four most important points as we go through this exercise today. Here is a slide, and you'll actually see this later on in the quarterly report for Chavez, the performance report that you're going to hear about later. The point here is, of course, expenses exceed revenues as we had projected. So part of this conversation has to go back to that O&M loan, because the question that we've been struggling with is how much does the RMA have in debt related to Cesar Chavez? Well, so let me talk a little bit about the O&M loan. It really had three main sections to it. The O&M loan it permitted up to 12 separate disbursements that would total $9.4 million. So if you really think about the O&M loan, it functions very similar to a line of credit. So each year the RMA could pull down a disbursement and use it for the expenses that it needed in that particular fiscal year. So there have been 3 disbursements made to date totaling $3.6 million. Again, there's the availability of up to 12 different disbursements that would total $9.4 million in permitted debt. The O&M loan, though, also had consolidated several debts that the RMA had incurred prior to the O&M loan that we had incurred specifically for the development of Cesar Chavez, and that totaled an additional $673,000 that was rolled into the O&M loan. So it was kind of a cleanup activity to get rid of, as I mentioned, those 15 different agreements. Some of those included debt that the RMA incurred in the planning or the design phase. So at this point in the O&M loan, we cleaned that up and rolled those previously incurred debts into this O&M loan. And the final component includes a flat fee interest amount of $6 million. Now that $6 million is based on, and it can be prorated, but it's based on the disbursement. So $6 million is imposed if we pull the full $9.4 million worth of disbursements. However, if we pull half, then half of that $6 million flat fee would be imposed. So those were the 3 components that make up the O&M loan. Also of note, although we have pulled the 3 separate disbursements, we have not used the full $3.6 million, and that'll come into play here once we start talking about the options. So toll removal options, we reviewed several options, but at the outset the RMA board was very clear that any options had to include 2 specific provisions. And the first one is that the RMA could not retain any debt incurred by the operation and maintenance of the express toll lanes. And that makes a lot of sense because the RMA is still an unfunded agency. So if we lost the toll revenues, then there's no way for us to make those operation and maintenance expenses, no way for us to make those payments. The second provision, which is also very important, is that if the tolls are removed, then TxDOT has to take over the operations and maintenance of that facility into perpetuity. So the idea is if you take away the tolls, then the operation and maintenance have to shift to TxDOT, and we can't be left with any debt afterwards. So those were the 2 baseline considerations that we walked into the conversations with TxDOT with at the board's direction. So with that in mind, we spoke with TxDOT about 5 separate scenarios. Each of the scenarios include the concept that TxDOT would be responsible for taking over the operations and maintenance. So the first option, of course, is always an option, which is no change. So the tolls would remain in place, and we would proceed as we had originally planned. The second option, and these are in no particular order really, but the second option then was the idea that the debt would be retired by use of other funds. So the idea here, by way of example, there was an idea floated about a funding source that's coming out of the state called Rider 11, which is a fund that was set up to pay for border infrastructure. The idea was that we could use the El Paso region's allocation to pay down the debt that had been incurred by the RMA. Now that was met by opposition from everyone from, well, most folks at the MPO were definitely opposed to this option. So that option has essentially gone away. Toll suspension was another idea. The idea would be that we, as we know through the traffic and revenue studies, Chavez will not generate revenue for X number of years. So the idea would be we would suspend the tolls until the traffic and revenue study. In fact, the traffic patterns show that we could generate revenue to cover the expenses. Now, we ran into some issues with that one from a legal standpoint in that there are toll conversion statutes in place, which mean if you operate a non-toll facility, you cannot flip it into a toll facility. So the question would be, if we left a toll facility as, for example, a promotional period where there would be no tolls, would it be considered a conversion after 12 years, for example, if we flipped it back to a toll facility? So there were some legal issues with that option. The fourth option then was forgiveness of debt. The idea here was that TxDOT would simply forgive the debt that has been incurred by the RMA for the operations and maintenance of Chavez. TxDOT at this time is not considering this particular option. So that then leaves us with the final option, which is the shifting of debt to Border West Expressway. So we're going to talk about that next. So this really appears to be the only viable option for the removal of tolls on Chavez. However, as we've discussed on this one, the shifting of the RMA debt to the Border West Expressway will, in fact, reduce the RMA's ownership percentage of Border West Express. So let me talk a little bit about Border West. The way that particular project was structured was that the RMA would bring the $500 million grant to the project, and TxDOT would be responsible for constructing the facility. Whatever that total project cost at the back end was, whether it's $600 million, whether it's $700 or $800 million, TxDOT would be responsible for everything above $500 million that the RMA was bringing. And at the end of the project, if, for example, it was $600 million, then the individual contributions from each entity, the $500 million from the RMA and the $100 million from TxDOT, would then be used to calculate the percentage ownership of each entity. And the reason why that is important is that transfers then into who owns the toll revenues that are generated. So each entity would own their respective percentage. So that's the way that one was structured. So as I say, why that is so important is that if we shift debt over to Border West Expressway, then that dilutes the ownership percentage interest owned by the CRRMA. However, for discussion purposes then, I wanted to talk about what that really means in dollars and cents. So as I say here, for discussion purposes, we can use a total project cost of $626 million, which was an early number that was used for the project. But it appears by almost all indications that the total project cost will be higher than $626 million. But for discussion purposes, again, we'll use 626 because that was one of the earliest numbers used. In that scenario, with the RMA's contribution of $500 million, the RMA then, its ownership interest is approximately 79.8%. So if we were to shift the CRRMA's debt from Chavez to Border West Expressway using the $626 million as a scenario, our ownership interest would drop by somewhere between 0.4% and 2%. The reason why there's a range there is that there's different ways of handling the debt that we've incurred, and it could be anywhere from $3 million to $16 million. The idea, what I'm really trying to get across here is when you look at the debt that we've incurred to date, as you know, as I mentioned, we have $3 million in debt that we have pulled down. However, we've not used it all. So there's a scenario where we could return some of that principal, and then when we apply the prorated portion of the interest, the $6 million flat fee interest, to the amount that we actually have expended, it would result in a $3 million total debt, which would then result in a reduction in our total ownership interest of 0.4%. So hopefully that makes sense. So what I wanted to do is really show a range, right? So that's the smallest amount of impact that we could have. The largest amount of impact would then be if we actually pulled down the full $9.4 million in disbursements, you added the $6 million in interest, and then you added the $676,000 in prior consolidated funds. That would be the other end of the spectrum. In that scenario, it would reduce the RMA's ownership interest by 2%. So really, all in all of this is to say, in either scenario, best and worst case, the overall impact is fairly minimal to the RMA's ownership interest with this particular option. So, with that being said, I understand that this exercise has been about finding a viable option for removing tolls, and if that's the case, then I would suggest a motion to do two things. The first thing would be to authorize the chair to submit a formal request to TxDOT to begin negotiating the removal of tolls from Chavez. However, I would also note there, though, that the option should be very clear that the RMA debt would be shifted to the Border West Expressway project, but more importantly, and obviously, TxDOT would have to assume the operation and maintenance of the facility. So that would be the first part of the motion. The second then would be to direct staff to meet with TxDOT to actually negotiate and identify all of the minutia, work through all the details, and then come back to the board with a proposed approach on how to actually remove the tolls. So two-step. One, a formal letter telling TxDOT we are interested in pursuing this with debt shifting to Border West and TxDOT taking over operations and maintenance. And two, directing me to go and sit down with TxDOT and figure out all the different agreements that have to be terminated. How will that happen? What do we do with all of the facilities that are out there today? What do we do with the cameras that we've purchased? All of those details you would direct me to figure out and then come back to you all with a proposed plan forward for approval at that time. So subject to your questions, that's what I have for you.
Mr. Tejas, thank you very much for that analysis. I think the executive committee met yesterday, and it was very helpful to walk through the steps and really understand all the details and the steps we would need to take, as well as looking at each of the viability of each of those options. So I think that was important for us to walk through. And I know based on yesterday's meeting, the executive committee is recommending that we approve these two this motion that you just read. But any questions from?
I have a question. Explain to me, who is Border West Expressway? That's just a pot of money and well, you tell me.
Sure. So Border West Expressway is actually the facility that is being built today. That is the completion of the Loop 375, the southern portion.
Right.
So all of that activity that you see starting at the new Coles interchange just east of downtown, that heads over back behind Asarco and runs all the way up to Racetrack.
Right, but who? That's what, but who? Who is it? It's state of Texas?
Well, there's several who's in there, right? So the funding agencies include the RMA, because we're providing $500 million. TxDOT is providing the remainder. TxDOT is doing the oversight of the development of the joint venture that's actually building it. The joint venture is, it's a partnership between Kiewit and J.D. Abrams, so they're building it.
Okay.
But
so when we shift debt, we're shifting to that joint venture between?
No, sir. So the joint venture is the entity that's simply building it. In terms of who owns Border West Expressway, that's that percentage ownership that I told you about. So when you ask who owns, what is it? It's the roadway. Who owns it? It's TxDOT and RMA based on the percentage ownership.
So when you say shifting the debt, we're shifting it to the state of Texas, to TxDOT?
Well, we're really shifting it to a separate project of ours, right?
Okay. So that's the question. Who is Border West Expressway? And it's CRRMA?
And TxDOT.
Okay, so it's a just different ownership structure.
Correct.
So we're shifting it from CRRMA to CRRMA and TxDOT.
Yes, sir. And in effect, what we're doing is we're simply providing them with more ownership of Border West Expressway in exchange for this debt.
Okay. And Border West Expressway is jointly TxDOT and CRRMA.
Yes, sir.
So we're shifting some of CRRMA to this entity that's also partly CRRMA.
In essence, yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. Okay.
Good question, Mr. Niebuhr.
Yes, sir.
It's a little complicated, but it is where we give up some of our ownership in the Border West Expressway. So moving it from Cesar Chavez over to Ms. Inez.
Mr. Tejas, I think that you analyzed really well the impact, how to minimize the impact to the RMA on all this, but the last little icon that you had, which is eventually the RMA was expecting to get some revenue from the tolling on Cesar Chavez for maybe future projects. What happens with that? I mean, we won't be getting that anymore, and what is the impact to the RMA by not getting that? How much are we talking about?
So we looked at that. The issue really is a question of timing, though, because the Chavez facility was not scheduled to actually generate revenue beyond expenses for between 13 and 15 years from opening. So it opened in 2014, so we're talking about quite some time still. But we did run those numbers. So in 2033, there was a revenue expected of over $1.5 million.
Annually.
Yes, ma'am.
And so by doing this move, and I know we're talking a long term out, but we're planning that the RMA will be here a long time to fund these transportation projects. When we make that move and we decrease the percentage of ownership that the RMA has on the Border Highway West, we also lose some of that toll revenue that we're getting. So we're losing at 1.5 over here in 15, 20 years. And then we're losing, when Border Highway West comes in, a portion of that as well. Whatever,
ma'am.
the 0.4 or the 2%.
Yes, ma'am.
So there is some loss of revenue to us that could be used for future projects.
On both sides, yes,
That's
ma'am.
what I see as the ultimate impact here.
And also the
Absolutely.
O&M.
Pardon?
The O&M on Chavez too, we're no longer responsible.
Right, so
for.
that's figured into these figures
I
as
assume
well.
the
Okay.
1.5 million is kind of
The net.
in the black, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Potential 1.5 million.
That's true.
Because
These are all
15
projections.
years, there will be some maintenance due that we don't have funds for. So,
Well, we've been fairly conservative, but I think that what the point that you're getting to, which is a good one, is that these are all projections, right? So that's what we think is going to happen in 15 years. Could be more, could be less.
No, I understand that. I just,
But it's a good point. Absolutely.
And their projections in current dollars, are they not?
No, they've been. I believe they've been.
What kind of a discount rate?
That I couldn't tell you.
That's extremely important.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wardy?
Madam Chair, Ms. Nair, I think that is a good line of questioning, but there will be significant toll revenue from the Border West
that's
project.
my follow-up question. I want to know what the projections are for, Border West Expressway. I mean, how soon do you see a profit coming from that project?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know that off the top of my head, but it is much sooner than Chavez. I want to say it's in the 4 to 6 year range, but I'll get those numbers for all of you.
That would be interesting to bring back maybe to the
Certainly.
board.
I'll
to look
I'll
at.
get you that information hopefully later today, and then if you all would like to hear a little bit more about Border West at the next meeting, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yeah, Mr. Tace, can you just elaborate a little bit more on that last part, direct CRMA staff to meet with TxDOT and some of the details, and I know about them, but I think it'd be good for discussion.
Certainly. So what's intended there is to unwind a project as complicated and intertwined as Cesar Chavez. There's a lot of activities that have to happen. As I mentioned, there are more than 15 different agreements that would have to be terminated or amended in some way. So really what that second point is directing me to really figure out all of the different steps that need to be taken. There, by way of example, toll, there's 2 ways to use the toll, as you know. There's the pay by mail, which is one option, and then if you have a toll tag, then that's the other option. The toll tag runs through North Texas Tollway Authority, so we'd have to work out a closeout on that particular process. With pay by mail, we use Municipal Services Bureau to do collections for that one, so we'd have to figure out how to end those transactions. So there's just a whole slew of different things that have to be worked out to actually unwind this thing. So that second point then is really directing me to figure out what all those steps are and then come back to you all. And obviously work it out with TxDOT. Another good example is, and we were starting to talk about this, there are signs and cameras and gantries and readers that are now on the facility that need to come down. So the question is, does TxDOT take them down? Do we take them down? Who pays for that? How does that come out of the O&M loan? Does that come out of somewhere else? So lots and lots of questions to be answered between now and when I can come back to you all with a proposed approach. So that's what that second item is.
And you'll set dollar amounts to the cost and who's paying for what on that,
Absolutely.
Mr.
So,
Tez?
right, you'll need a complete picture, bottom line, what impact does this have to the RMA? And most importantly, what is the amount of debt that is being shifted over to Border West Expressway? By way of example, really, when we're talking about some of those facilities that the gantries, the signs that were placed, all of that was placed by TxDOT. We came in and did the readers and cameras for the actual toll improvements. So the question would be, if we remove the items that TxDOT placed, we shouldn't be responsible for repaying or including that as part of our debt that would be shifted over to Board of West. So again, and we could go down this avenue with so many different examples, but the point is the same, and that is there are lots of questions to be answered, asked and answered, and then I'll come back to you all with that complete picture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Or?
Just have one more
Go
question.
ahead.
Mr. Tejas, would you say this motion still allows for, I mean, what you anticipate in terms of shifting the debt and the percentage and all that, does this motion still allow you to kind of maybe come up with some unique ideas of how to do that to limit the impact to RMA? Because I understand the public benefit to having access to Cesar Chavez at no cost. I understand that. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of the RMA, trying to limit the long-term impact of the RMA and our ability to have some funding to fund projects in the future. So I just want to make sure this is broad enough that we're not boxing ourselves into those specific terms, and that you can, you know.
So it does give me very broad abilities to work within those two narrow parameters, right? So the parameters are debt, any debt on the RMA, whatever we figure that out to be, any debt on the Chavez facility would shift to Border West. So that's one of the parameters. And the second parameter is operations and maintenance have to ship to TxDOT. Mm-hmm. So how we achieve those two, that's where I have plenty of latitude to figure unique things out. But the proposal is that those two are the two parameters.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Neal.
A question regarding software. When the Chavez Tollway was set up, the software that was chosen was also used for the Tornillo Bridge, I think, and there were some economies of scale there. And I think the city also was going to adopt that system for all their bridges. So the two questions. Well, first, I guess if you tell us how that factors in, and I don't know if that's a significant amount of money, but does that leave our partners on the software in a bind?
No, it doesn't. So really what you're referring to is the integrator. In this particular case, we use an integrator by the name, well, they've changed their name. Schneider is their, one of them, actually now they're Capsch. Anyhow, Telvent was their original name, and that's probably how you all remember them. But the point is they are the entity that's charged with developing, planning, designing, and installing and maintaining the facilities that are up there that you're speaking to, specifically the tolling improvements, which include the cameras and the readers and that sort of thing. All of those go through the software that is developed by Telvent, Schneider, Capsch. Removing Chavez does not impact the county, nor would it impact Border West Expressway, which will use the same integrator as well. And if the city chooses to go down that path, it would not impact that as either. Really what it would do is, the original plan was that you would have the separate systems all speaking to each other and they're all interoperable with each other. So you would simply lose one of the partners. But they all would still work with each other. So there's virtually no impact other than the loss of one of the interoperable entities. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Entertain a motion to
Madam
approve.
Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the action, requested board action as read by Mr. Tejas into the record and as recommended by the executive committee.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 4 has been approved. Thank you. Item number 5. Thank you, Mr. Tejas. Presentation and discussion on the following performance reports for the third quarter of fiscal year 2016. A, El Paso Bike Share Sun Cycle Program. B, Cesar Chavez Express Toll Lanes. And C, GEC Team's use of local resources. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. So I've got another PowerPoint for you for this particular item. We're now talking about the bike share program, which we know locally here as Sun Cycle. We have another quarter under our belt, so I wanted to update you all on it. Of course, this is our map. We always start there. This is the second quarter of 2016, and really we're going to talk about the highlights, but it was a very strong quarter. As you'll recall, the last quarter was a little light because we were in the winter. As the weather warmed up, the numbers went up. Bike trips, we had 2,488 in this period, and this is the last three months of March, April, and May. We had total ridership duration of 115 minutes, which is looking very strong. Calories burned, that's always an interesting one, 550,000, and carbon offset of 13,000 pounds. So a total distance of 13,813 miles ridden in that 3-month period as well. So a lot of good activity. This is in your backup as well, so you can review this at your leisure. It shows trip volume by duration and trip volume by membership type. And by day of week, you'll notice that Saturday and Sunday continue to be our strongest days. And it's a little bit hard to see on this one, but what you'll see and what's interesting and what makes sense really in the final graph there on the bottom is that the usage time has shifted. Because of the heat, you're now seeing rides starting at 8 and ending at 10. That's really our peak now. It used to be earlier, 6 to 8 is what it was in the prior quarter. But that, of course, that makes sense with the extreme heat we're dealing with right now. Here's the detail. And this one, I like this one a lot because it shows you the different quarters that we've had. That first quarter, which started off strong, and then we ran into the winter in quarter 2. The numbers dropped, and quarter 3, you can see, has really taken off. So you're seeing significant increases in that third quarter in all categories: ride taken, the minutes, the miles, and of course calories burned as well. That's an interesting one. The calories burned were at the end of this quarter, and we've actually passed it. We were just shy of 1 million calories burned, which is a pretty neat little figure. Also important, this is a newer edition that you all asked for, a glimpse at the financials. You'll see quarter 3 revenues were significantly higher than quarter 2. We're up at $12,000 in revenues, and it shows you also that the O&M funds remaining are still above $300,000. So we're in good shape and doing well. I'd mention also a couple of different notes that I didn't include in the PowerPoint, but which I think are good. In June, significant numbers were showing again. In fact, actually, our strongest day to date was held this last Sunday, where we had 196 rides in a single day. So that was a great achievement. And so, like I say, you're continuing to see increases. March was a strong month. As you saw in here, we had a Segundo Barrio bike tour that made the press, which was, I think, an interesting use of our program. And Bike Month in May actually was a really helped with our numbers as well. There is Velo El Paso. In fact, there's a representative here who was asked to speak on this item from Velo El Paso, who had a number of bike events scheduled in Bike Month, which was May. We actually were able to sell them promotional codes at a discounted rate, so he passed those out to his members and used the program a lot in the month of May. So a lot of strong usage and a lot of continuing interest. Here's some other program highlights. Pioneer Plaza had the most checkouts in this last quarter, significantly higher than all the other stations, even though Cleveland Square had higher numbers last quarter. So it's an interesting flip-flop. And in fact, actually the top 50 routes, the top 3 of them are actually round trips. The first one is from Pioneer to Pioneer, second is Cleveland, and third is Anthony to Anthony. However, the very next one is actually Pioneer to Cleveland. So you see a lot of activity in this downtown area connecting these different stations. Phase 2 expansion, here's a very brief update. The installations are proposed for next week and planned to begin next week. The bikes have been delivered and they're under construction by our operations and maintenance guys. And we are currently working, we had planned a station for Mundy Park. We met with Sunset Heights Neighborhood Association on a couple of different occasions. They proposed that we move it, and we're actually in that conversation with them now. So that the placement of that station likely won't be in this next grouping next week, but we're working on with them to make sure that we land in a location that they appreciate. Then the last point there, which I think is an interesting one, is that we heard from the convention center that they're interested in having a station on their campus. and they are seeking funds for that station, which could become available as early as September. So we're working with them on potentially placing a station specifically for the convention center. So again, another way to highlight the additional interest that we're seeing for this program. So subject to your questions, that's all I have for you. We also have Cesar Martinez, who is part of our operations and maintenance team, if you have any operational questions. And again, Scott White from the Velo El Paso group is here, and I believe he would like to address the board as well.
Mr. Tejas, just a couple questions. Because of the popularity of this program at this point, where are we going out on promoting and selling sponsorships for our stations, for our bikes, since we really have this great momentum that's been built? I know you've been working on it, but could you update us on
Certainly.
that?
So we have the bones of the promotional materials. So we have it written out, and in fact, actually, Caesar and I are going through that, and hopefully we'll have our comments back to the Barracuda PR folks, which is who we use for a lot of our outreach campaign. We should have our comments back to them by the end of next week, and then we'll go to print, and we'll be ready to begin the promotional campaign.
Well, this is great information to let the media know, the press know, and really the public know about how popular this program is and really the impact it's having on our community.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for that update. Any comments or questions?
Madam Chair.
Mr.
One
Niemeyer?
question, are the bike racks ever empty?
Question.
I wouldn't think so. Part of the operations and maintenance team, their duties are to monitor each of the stations to do what's called balancing. So if ever there's a station that is completely full or completely empty, they're monitoring for that so they can swap out bikes.
Yes, Mr. Niemeyer, my name is Cesar Martinez. I am the owner of Mesilla Pedicab, and we're the operation management team for the bike share program. And it is extremely possible that the bike racks will be empty just due to increased use, but we have a notification system that lets us know. We're located in downtown. We're always nearby. So that's our instruction to get down there and start rebalancing the stations, look at customer usage, and start shifting bikes around, making sure that we're addressing any gaps. It's very rare for anything like that to happen, but certainly a possibility, but we have a remedy for it just the same.
Right. Well, with a promotional activity, you sure don't want your bike racks to be empty when somebody really needs a ride, so.
You won't see them empty for even over an hour. The notifications happen that fast.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Any questions would you like? You have a comment?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Board, Mr. Tejas. I want to thank Mr. Martinez. He's been a great
Do you
partner.
mind introducing
Oh, I'm
your
sorry.
name
Scott White with Velo Paso Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. I haven't got quite that far. But I did want to thank, first off, Mr. Martinez. He's been a great partner. When we were working with him in Bike Month to help put that promotional package together, it really gave us an opportunity to give some people who didn't have access to their own bikes an opportunity to come out and join us for the events during Bike Month, and also for us to return the favor and help promote Sun Cycle so that more people could see that this is really not just a toy, but a real amenity for the community. And we're hoping that as Phase 2 comes into place, you're going to see some of that usage numbers go up. We're hoping that with some of the efforts that we're doing to help promote better bicycle infrastructure within the community, we're going to see more people feeling comfortable to come out and ride, so that the program is really going to become a true resource to the community, that people don't feel they always need to get in their car to go somewhere, but they can get out, they can walk, they can bike, and feel comfortable out there. And that the return on this is there's also going to be the economic impact to the downtown, so that when you all talk to City Hall, the City Council, and say, what is it you're doing to help the community? It's projects like this that may not seem on the same scale as some of the other construction projects, but are really making a fundamental impact in the lives of the people of El Paso. Thank you.
Thank you for your support, Mr. White. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Another individual that would like to address the board.
Good morning.
Chair and Board. My name is Melissa Lugo, and I'm also a volunteer with Bel Paso Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. And I'm just here to speak on behalf of the Bike Share program and to talk a little bit about what Mr. Theus presented this morning. Some of the programming that we do revolves around events for active transportation to promote that. And so it was really interesting to see how that provided us the opportunity for partnerships with the American Institute of Architects, the El Paso chapter, and also with UTEP Student Government Association, with the Texas Tross Society, among many other groups that are interested in promoting active transportation. So I just wanted to say thank you this morning for considering active transportation and to continue looking toward that direction, because like we see, it's benefiting the community. We can count calories, and it's a great thing for the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lugo. Any comments or questions? Okay, thank you.
That's all I have on this particular item.
Okay, so now we're on to Cesar Chavez. Will give us an update.
Yes, ma'am. Today we have with us David Head, who is part of our general engineering consultant team. Normally, you'll recall, normally we have Ron Fagan as part of our GEC team to provide the update on Chavez. However, he's got some medical issues, so he wasn't able to make it. So we have David Head presenting for us today.
Good morning, David Head with GEC, and as it was mentioned, I'll be doing the Cesar Chavez quarter performance report. Okay, so transactions per working day, what we're seeing is, what transactions per day is the amount of cars going through the facility each day. And so we're really focused on quarter 3 right now, which is your March, April, and May time frame. And up on the slide, you'll see that there is a blue bar, which is your FY 2016. Then your gold bar is 15, and 2014 is in the purple. And what you'll see is that in quarter 3, the transactions went up in the first March and April, or they actually are kind of mimicking what was in 2015. And then they dropped off quite a bit in May. We don't really know why that happened. Some speculation is it may be something on I-10, Army, whatever. We're still looking at that. We'll try to explain that at some point. But right now we're still kind of scratching our heads with the drop in May. So the total transactions, what this graph is, or what this slide is showing, is that in quarter 3, you've got several things going on, but it's split out into the different quarters and the different fiscal years. So the bars are representing the dollar amounts, and then they're split out by the toll transponders, the AVI people that are using that versus the pay by mail. And there's a red squiggly line there that is the 2016 AVI penetration, which is basically those users, are there more coming in, or what's the usage there? And so what I'm looking at is that it looks like from quarter 1 through quarter 3, it's pretty much been stagnant for those AVI users. So it's really not climbing that much. We don't anticipate it to. But the pay-by-mail seems to be the way to go with these users. So that pay-by-mail, what I've been told is that they're the infrequent users that use it not every day, but will use it when needed. And so that split, the AVI users is around, I think it's 37%. And I've been told that we like to see that up quite a bit more, like in the 70–80%, but it's just not there. Excuse me. Let's see. Also, think that's all I can, up at the top in the boxes, what you'll see is the transactions versus forecast. So for 2016, there was a 20% difference between the transactions versus what was forecasted versus what was in FY15, which was the 14%, which was a 14% difference. Okay, total revenue, and what this is showing is the forecast versus what is actual out there. So the purple is FY, or is the actual, and what I'm seeing is that the forecast and the actual are about the same for quarter 3 in FY16. But if you look back at quarter 2 versus quarter 3, there was a pretty big jump in that quarter. It was around 33%. And that would be the good news for it. And then up at the top in those boxes, you'll see that the collected versus the forecast for 2016, there's a 2% difference. But I don't think that we're going to make that up over the rest of the fiscal year. These are the numbers for what we're just talking about. So if you have questions, at some point you can refer back to that, and that'll give you the actual dollar amounts. And then the revenue versus expenses. The expenses are the things like the collections, the operations, the insurance, the maintenance, those things that cost. I think you saw this slide in one of Mr. Tejas' presentations. And in 2016, the revenue is catching up to the expenses. Is kind of the good news. And so that would be the takeaway. Also, if I remember correctly, in 2016, the forecast expenses was forecast to be $1.1 million, and we're way below that right now. This is your disabled veteran waiver program. If you remember, that was started back around October, and what it was is to give disabled veterans that have a certain percentage of disability a waiver on using the toll roads. And so in that, we've issued 102 toll tags. There was approximately 5,000 transactions, which is about 1.6% of the total transactions. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Head? Thank you very much.
So for the next item, this is the presentation related to consultant team resources. Mr. Head will present that one as well.
Okay, again, David Head with General Engineering Consultant, and this is the local use by the GEC. So we'll talk about the life-to-date expenditures data. We'll go through a graphical representation of that, and then we'll have the summary by firm and any questions you may have. So this is from inception to date, and we're really interested in quarter 29 now. But the local labor is on the left side in the first column, dollar amounts. And down at the bottom in the red boxes, quarter 26, May to July of 2015 to the current one that we're talking about, quarter 29, February to April of 2016, we've jumped significantly. We've gone to 67% in the percent use of local labor. I attribute a lot of that to we're moving now into construction, and so we're starting to see an uptick with all the local people that need to be here, and they're not in firms that can do work outside of there. So we've really started stepping that up, but it's at 67%, and then the total from inception to date is around 51%. This is a graph of what you were just seeing on the last slide, and what it is the gold bar is the local labor, and the purple bar is the non-local by dollar amount, and then the gray squiggly line is a percent local, and these are by quarters. And then you have the purple squiggly line, which is the local to date percentage-wise. So again, we're at 67%. If you look at the squiggly line, we're seeing that uptick in the local labor, and I'd have to say that even myself, we're bringing in somebody back to El Paso from Austin that was local, that we're bringing back in to help out with all this uptick in labor that we've seen. So this is a summary by firm of all the firms that are on the GEC and the amounts to date, and like I said, it's at 51%. With that, I would entertain any questions.
Mr. Head, if we can go back to that last chart. This is from inception? Is this from the very beginning?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. Good. Any questions or comments? Good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, discussion and action on a board resolution to approve the terms for continued employment of the RMA's executive director and authorize the RMA to continue to reimburse the city of El Paso for the employment of the executive director. So, Mr. Taz, this is all about you today, apparently. Mr. Gordon.
Morning, Madam Chairman. Norman Gordon, outside counsel. I think if you want to discuss this in executive session, that you can, and so I'd recommend that you consider whether you want to do that.
Because this item does call for executive session, I'd entertain a motion to retire to executive session.
Move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And
Okay,
the record
we'll move
will
into executive session.
And the record should reflect that you're going into executive session to discuss agenda item number 6, discussion and action on board resolution to approve the terms for continued employment of the CRRMA's executive director, and B, authorize the CRRMA to continue to reimburse the city of El Paso for employment of the executive director. And this is being done pursuant to the Texas Government Code sections 555.071, consultation with attorney, and section 551.074, personnel matters.
Thank you. And we're retiring to executive session on July 13th at 10 o'clock. It is 10:30 on July 13th, and can I have a motion to reconvene to regular session?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We are now in session.
Could I have just a moment before we do this presentation to talk to Mr. Tays?
Certainly, Mr. Gordon. Thank you.
I think the mayor is responsible for setting that clock.
Probably was short. Oh.
Oh, well. I'll have to get you in contact with Little Rock, Dr. Ortiz.
Okay.
I think you could be surprised or pleased.
Mr. Gordon.
Yes. Madam Chairman, we prepared a resolution for your consideration, and it had, as we had distributed, an attachment to it, and there are a couple of changes we're going to suggest to the attachment. So let me just read the resolution into the record quickly. Well, not that quickly, but whereas the City of El Paso provides management services to the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority, CRRMA, in part through the provision of an executive director who is employed by contract with the city. And whereas the contract between the city and the CRRMA's executive director expires August 31, 2016, but the CRRMA desires to continue operating with the current executive director for an additional term commencing September 1, 2016. And whereas the CRRMA board further desires to continue the existing arrangement with the city whereby the city employs the executive director but is reimbursed by the RMA for its associated salary and benefits, provided, however, that the CRRMA approves such salary and benefits. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority that the CRRMA board hereby approves the salary and benefits for the executive director as fully enumerated within Exhibit A to this board resolution, and that the CRRMA hereby authorizes the reimbursement of the city for the salary and benefits of the executive director during the term of employment as also enumerated within Exhibit A to the board resolution. And as we have made, we're suggesting two changes to the description of the terms that were previously provided to you. Under the term merit increases, it will now read employee eligible for annual increases starting effective September 1, 2017, based on annual evaluations by the CRRMA board per an evaluation process to be developed between the employee and the CRRMA board. The employee shall receive 3% increase in years in which the employee receives and exceeds expectations or equivalent rating. The percentage increase noted herein may be increased and bonuses may be provided upon the approval of the board. And then under the term vacation sick leave, it will read, vacation and sick leave shall follow the city's policies as may be amended. And any language that was contrary to that will be deleted as we conform this. So, other than that, the terms as we had discussed them are not changed and passed out.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Any comments, questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? So item number 6 has been approved based on the changes that were read into the record today. Thank you. So Raymond, Mr. Tejas, thank you very much for all your hard work. We can't tell you enough how much we appreciate all that you do, and every day that you come in, and as I said, getting emails in the middle of the night sometimes because we know you're working all the time. So we thank you and appreciate the work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all of your support. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other business for the RMA this morning? I'll entertain a motion to
Move to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned on July 13th at 10:35. Thank you.
One day.